Welcome to the 14th installment in the living history of Bill Thomson. I'm Relendra, interviewing my father, Bill Thomson, about his life and memories and experiences. And welcome to installment 14, Dad. How are you? How are you doing?
Okay.
Good. Well, we left off in the early 80s, around 1984, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Trying to think. Well, I guess there's some new technology coming in at the time. I remember around 1984 is where my memories start to kind of come in.
Okay.
So I remember that we had a VCR.
Yep.
So that was something new. And a big, heavy piece. It was like a big, with a button where they came up on the top and you would put it in and put it into the top of the VCR.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was like a video thing of some sort.
Yeah, VCR to play video cassettes on.
Yeah. Okay.
And later on they became smaller, right? And you would just kind of slide the tape in. But I remember we had this big, bulky, heavy one.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
weighed about 30 pounds. Yeah. And it was like,
yeah.
push this button and then a top loading cartridge receiver would come up.
That's right. That's right.
Push it down.
I'd forgotten that.
I remember that. I remember we had the record player with the cassette tapes where you could record. And
I've still got the cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Actually, I've still got the same unit right here in the den.
Oh yeah. But I remember that we had a number of mixtapes that you and Mom would listen to. Especially up at Priest Lake, we would often bring those mixtapes up with us, and
we used to play them in the car when on the way up.
And in the car, yeah.
I remember one song I always sang. Do you remember? Like a Rock?
I remember that, yeah. That was one of your favorites.
All these years, where'd they go?
20 years, I don't know
where they've gone. And sometimes late at night, in the firelight. I still sing as bad as I used to.
Well, I remember we had a big microwave, also just really big, heavy thing.
A big, heavy what?
Microwave.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that was like one of the first microwaves. It was one of the first VCRs. We kind of had the early versions of those things. Yeah. And we had an Atari video game system.
Right.
The Atari 800, I remember.
Yeah.
We only had two games, Pac-Man and Centipede.
Say that again?
We had two games, Pac-Man and Centipede.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of the texture that I remember at the time. I think even at that age, I was kind of aware that these were more recent kind of technologies.
Yeah, they were.
That used to exist, yeah.
Well, you got to figure, what, that's 40 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Where'd all the time go?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I remember also at the time we were living up on C Street, the Bialystokis lived nearby.
What was nearby?
The Bialystokis.
Oh, yeah.
So those are somebody that I remember from the time that we would spend a lot of time with, because we, Katie and myself were in similar age as Guy and Tali Bialystoki.
Yeah.
So I remember the family, we'd have families, the families would get together as well.
Yeah.
What do you remember about them?
What's interesting is that I have better memory of things far, way back than I do of something more recent.
Uh-huh.
So I don't recall at all.
Okay. You're not
I think
remembering
if
the,
you ask something specific, it'll probably bring it back.
well, you remember who they were though?
Do I remember what?
Who they were, the Bialystokis.
Do I remember where?
Who they were.
Who are you talking about now?
The Bialystokis.
Oh, the Bialystokis. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. Did they live up behind us for a while?
Well, they lived just down the street
Yeah,
on the corner of Cherry and C Street.
yeah. But didn't they move up behind it?
Oh, maybe before my memory goes back, they may have lived up behind,
That
further up
could
the
be.
hill. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Guy Bialystoki.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to remember his sister's name. What was her name?
Tali.
That's right.
Uh-huh. And then Ari and Dora were the parents.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember them very well? Anything that you can
Well, we
remember?
didn't really hang out with them very much at all. Uh, he and I would talk sometimes,
Mhm.
about university stuff and that kind of thing. And his wife, she didn't she didn't offer that much. I don't think she talked. Mostly was concerned about the kids,
Uh-huh.
and she talked to your mom off and on, but not very frequently.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't say we were real close to them in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Where you get together regularly, like we did with Jay Sheldorf and Marilyn.
Uh-huh. Um, well, and then around that time, I became friends with Kyle Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the family would spend time with the Roses with his parents
Right,
as well.
right,
So
right.
that's what I remember was the family. I remember us going to the Sheldorf sometimes, but also to the Bialystokis or to the Roses.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's about the time we really started socializing with them a lot more.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah. What do you remember about the Roses?
Well, of course, what was his wife's name? I forget that already.
Nicole.
Nicole. Yeah, yeah. She was kind of a basket case, and a lot of it was because of the way she grew up. And she was born in France,
Uh-huh.
and the family moved, and I can't remember all the ins and outs, but I remember I got pretty close with Alan,
Yeah.
and I remember one time sitting having coffee, really not too long ago. This is maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and just talking about Nicole and all her problems, and she just got worse with age, and because everything that had happened to her,
Yeah.
came back and swarmed her brain,
Uh-huh.
and the way Alan, and I haven't talked to Alan since that time we met, and he told me at the time that it was getting real difficult to even have a conversation with her.
Okay.
It's like she was going off the deep end, which reminds me I ought to give him a call, see how he's doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to remember. I think he said that when she passed away, he, if I recall correctly, he was going to go back to Europe,
Oh, yeah.
or Europe or England or someplace. I'm not quite sure of that, but it seems to
Okay.
me that's what he said.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, I remember you used to talk about you kind of met them early on before you became friends when they were very um you know firebrands, politically on the
Yeah,
college campus scene.
yeah, oh yeah, 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 yeah. He came. We put on in the chemical engineering. Lou Edwards and
Uh-huh.
I, we put on a few seminars, trying to make it interdisciplinary.
Hmm.
And I think Alan came to one or two of them. And
Yeah.
it would be like a seminar thing, but where everybody just opened up. It really wasn't a seminar, nobody preaching. and just discussing the topics that were everybody was concerned about at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I remember we had a pre-med student. We tried to get a good cross section, and he was just so worried about getting into medical school.
Hmm.
He says, "I can't have any opinions."
Okay.
I said, "Great, just what we want from our doctors."
Right. Yeah. Well, that that kind of strikes home. Yeah, as far as doctors just kind of
Yeah, yeah,
becoming servants of the pharmaceutical and medical industry
yeah, yeah,
rather than
yeah,
actually being healers, like invested in your health.
yeah. Well, they're all about making money.
Yeah.
We have, we've got a really good family doc,
Uh-huh.
Mendoza. He is really good.
Yeah.
Uh, and then, I've been going to this rheumatologist type guy, not very often. And in, in my feeling, the jury is still out on, so far he hasn't done much other than he even took a whole pile of blood tests and never gave me the results. So then I thought, well, maybe he sent them to my family doc, Mendoza.
Uh-huh.
So I got a hold of Mendoza's office. He's never received any of them either,
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's all about. But I've got an appointment with him next week, and maybe my final appointment with him.
Okay. Well, getting back to the early 80s, just want to
Okay.
try to think if there's anything else I can mention that'll bring up some memories or a story or something. Uh, there's not that much coming to mind. I guess we can move along to, it would have been 1985 when you and mom split up while we were on vacation.
Oh, she stayed down there
Yeah.
for a bit. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I can't remember what that was even all about. Probably some argument we had or something. And
Yeah. Well, we went to go see the Yankees Angels game.
that's right. That's right. And why was that a problem?
Well, I don't know that it was, I don't know if that was really the problem, but I remember that we went to see that baseball game. I would have been about 5 years old.
Yeah.
We are down on vacation in the LA area, Orange County,
Yeah.
going to Disneyland, and then also the Angels game with the Yankees were playing.
Yeah.
Um, it was a really long game. It was an extra innings game.
Yeah.
So it was like a really actually kind of exciting baseball game that night. But the two of you uh, got into an argument when we were back at the hotel.
Hmm.
And of course, I was too young to register what you were arguing about.
I don't remember.
But the next morning, she took me and Katie on a train down to San Diego,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you and Amy stayed in the Anaheim and returned back to Moscow alone.
Yeah. 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 And I don't remember what that was all about, but
Do you remember anything about that period of time or what was going on for you?
uh, not really. Amy was pretty good. I mean, she was pretty self-reliant and met some of her friends and high school friends and stuff. Um, and your mom and I talked on the phone periodically.
Uh-huh.
Uh, there was always, your mom was always looking for what was missing. And so quite often she would want, if she stayed in Southern California, maybe she would find what it was that was missing, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so all it took was any kind of a disagreement between the two of us to set that whole thing off. Uh, and her dad, I think he was down there at that time.
He was, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't remember. I don't even remember how you guys came back even.
Well, we stayed down there about 4 months,
Right.
and we're living down there in Ramona.
That's right. In Ramona. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Uh,
forgot about that part. Yeah.
and we ended up coming back before Christmas. We had Christmas
Okay. Okay.
back in Moscow.
Okay. So that was the spark that brought you back then, was Christmas. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Hmm. Do you remember there's a hmm. Anything else you remember about that separation or anything?
Well, your mom was always unhappy.
Uh-huh.
And it was very, very complicated.
Yeah.
Uh, so whatever differences, she and I had, and every marriage has its differences.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but it was way deep seated than that. Like she should have been somebody, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And she got a lot of that from her dad. And I'm trying to remember when he passed away. It was after that though.
Well, he survived her, so he didn't die till after she was gone.
Say that again.
He didn't die until a few years after she died.
That's right. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. So I don't know. It was to say that I sort of understood what your mom was. She was missing what she thought she should have been doing and should have had and what have you. And so any kind of a difference that came up, it just brought that back. What did I do? I should have been somebody.
Uh-huh.
and and then she started thinking about, she's going to go down and write the next best-selling short story, and that kind of thing. I didn't understand a lot of it.
Uh-huh. And then do you remember how it felt when she returned, and how, if you were getting
Well,
along,
I was
that
glad
was?
she returned.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I, I, I don't know whether I could say things had turned. Maybe they changed. Maybe they had,
Hmm.
because she had tried all these different things, and none of them made her feel any different.
Uh-huh.
So in some ways, she might have just become more accustomed to, you know, living as a family. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I think her expectations always came from what her dad had, told her how brilliant she was. And, she was very, very intelligent. And so her dad was always telling her that. And she just kind of compartmentalized that to say, I should be doing something more with my life. And I think that was always in the back of her mind.
I can remember after we came back, the two of you were continuing to have a lot of fights.
Uh-huh.
I remember one time Katie and we left the house on C Street just to be out on the sidewalk because the two of you were fighting, and she had mentioned to me she was wondering if the two of you were going to get a divorce. And I remember that's how I learned what divorce was. I'd never heard of that before.
Mm-hmm. Well, there were a lot of those kind of things.
Yeah.
That, when somebody gets to be so, say, what year would that have been?
1986.
Okay, so your mom would have been 40, just turning 40, right?
By that time she was 41.
41.
Yeah.
And that's a time in life when people start saying, is this all there is?
Yeah.
And when you've lived as long now as I have, you realize that at this point, but you didn't realize it at that point, that
Uh-huh.
that's going on.
Yeah.
And it's always like, I guess it's like, what do they call it? The American dream,
Uh-huh.
you know, where everybody's going to be somebody,
Uh-huh.
and we're all going to have this wonderful life with, no worries or concerns. And, it's just not very realistic.
Yeah. So then it would have been later that year during the summer that you decided to move to the house on Garfield Street, the greenhouse.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That's about right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's about the time your mom got friends with Marion, right?
That was still a few years off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I remember you made the sign for us, the address sign on the lawn.
Oh, yeah. That was also years later. That I didn't make that sign till after Mom died.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just yeah. I'm trying to remember the year that she died. What do you remember what year that was?
She died in 94.
94.
So we moved into the greenhouse in 86, and we were there for about 8 years before she died.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And don't much remember about the green. Yeah, I remember I was intimidated by it because there was so much house
Yeah,
and even property to take care of,
yeah,
And it's yeah, it was a nice house. I mean, I just that's where I remember you sitting at the table down there all the time.
right, right.
And yeah, that was and the bird. We had a bird.
We had a bird, yeah. A few years later, we got a bird,
Yeah, and,
cockatiel.
and she loved to attack me when I was sitting at the dining room table.
Yeah. Well, because she would fly from these two different roost points. And
Right,
the dining room table is down below, and
right.
so she'd kind of fly, but
Yeah,
swoop by sort of nearby your head
yeah, yeah.
when she would fly through.
A lot of fun.
And we had a bunch of pets. We had the two cats, Percy and Lacey.
Right. We had the turtle. Remember the turtle?
No, that must have been before my time.
No, it was about the same time. But what did your mom do? I can't remember. There was some bad thing about it. She let it loose or something because she couldn't stand it anymore.
Okay.
And then there was something else. She was always trying to find some kind of animals or something that would, brighten up her life, I guess.
Yes, I remember we had gerbils for many years,
Gerbils, right? Right, right.
and we also had a hamster. Was it a
That,
hamster?
yeah,
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 for a period of time.
right. And they would gerbils or something would get out the screen door or somebody would leave it open, and then we try to recover them. And it was pretty stressful.
Uh-huh. And then we got the dog Chica uh,
Yeah,
after a couple years in the greenhouse.
yeah. And she was a real case, because she wasn't trained.
Uh-huh.
And she got the dog. Seems to me we got the dog from a friend of hers or something like that.
Yeah. Well, Katie had a friend named Lana
That
Rosgan,
that's right.
and Lana lived at a farm,
Right.
a little
Right.
farm, sort of like on the edge of town.
Yeah.
And yeah, they had a bunch of animals there, and they had a sort of a litter of puppies that had come up.
Right. Right.
And after a few months,
Yeah.
Mom kind of like set her eyes on Chica
Yeah.
and said, "Okay, this is the one that we're gonna
Yeah.
bring in."
And of course, she never got trained.
Yeah,
And that's the issues with animals. They have to be trained to be a good animal to be around the house. And
mhm,
if you're not willing to do that, all you've got is problems.
uh-huh,
And I like Chica, but she was always trying to burst out of the house, and
yeah,
so you'd always be closing doors and things, because she had no training at all.
yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah. So I remember at that time one of those years we took a family trip to Boston.
oh, I remember that. You and Katie
Uh-huh.
each had a boyfriend girlfriend thing, and I
Oh
remember.
no, that was later. That was after Mom died when we did go to Boston, but we went to DC, New York, and Boston.
Okay.
But prior to that,
Where did we go first? New York, probably, right?
well, we started in DC and then moved up to New York and then to Boston. But that was later. That was in 96.
Okay.
So in the late 80s, sometime around like 87, we took a trip to Boston and visited Aunt Marion.
And just looking at the historical stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did the historical stuff and we visited your Aunt Marion.
And we what?
Aunt Marion?
Oh, Aunt Marion. Yeah.
Yeah, we visited her
Oh, we went to Taunton.
in Taunton. Yeah.
Yeah. Was Grandma Thompson still alive at that point?
No.
No. Okay.
I remember you have a story about her when some point before she died, they were trying to get her out of her house.
Yeah.
And they turned
Yeah.
off the water or something like that.
Right. Right. And they told her that the water system was broken.
Uh-huh.
And so then she moved in with Aunt Marion, who only lived 2 blocks away.
Uh-huh.
And so I was there at a social function when it was Father Bill they were making him some kind of important priest of some sort. And there was a big ceremony and I came down and we had it was in, I can't remember whose house it was in, but anyway, we were in one of the, maybe Aunt Marion's house, and the whole family was there. And she came up to me and she wanted to know, out of the side of her mouth, she asked if I was the one that was the engineer. And I said, yeah, I was a chemical engineer. And then she said, know anything about water? And she and Aunt Marion didn't get along at all.
Okay.
Well, they're both similar personalities. Aunt Marion was pretty rigid in a lot of ways. And so finally, she moved up with Aunt Mary, who lived up in north of Boston. And and that's where she died, was up there.
Okay.
And that worked out better because she got along. Mary was the youngest of all the kids. And so I think she wasn't as harsh with Mary. And Mary, plus, was pretty easygoing. And her husband, Uncle Jim, was really easygoing. You know, I really liked him. He was really a nice guy. He'd been a minor league baseball player.
That's right.
Did I tell you that we one time met Babe Ruth?
I think maybe you did. I don't remember the story though.
It was spring training.
Okay.
And he was at the Boston Red Sox spring training camp, and they were playing the Yankees. And he walked by Babe Ruth, or Babe Ruth walked by him, and he said, "Hi, kid." And oh, he told that story at least 10 times.
Okay.
But he was really a very good. He got injured in some way, but he was a very, very good baseball player.
Yeah.
And then, Sandy was his oldest, and then the younger one was Jimmy, and he had Jimmy playing baseball from the age of 8.
Okay.
And he wanted him to be a pitcher, and he was teaching him at the age of 8 and 9 how to throw a curveball. A good way to ruin your arms.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I always liked him. And one of my funny stories about him is I went up visiting him. This is after his wife had died. She died some kind of cancer. I can't remember which. And so I was up there visiting one time, and so Sandy and I went out and we picked him up. He was living up in up near Cape Cod.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to go somewhere. He wanted to take us to his favorite restaurant. Boy, was that an episode. So he said, "Follow me." And by this time, he was getting to be a little, loss of memory, getting elderly.
Yeah.
But he was driving 60 miles an hour on these semi highways. And he goes barreling, and I'm trying to keep up with him. And Sandy is sitting next to me in the car.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, you see the brake lights go on. He pulls into the dirt, and he starts to make a U-turn. There's a lot of traffic out there. And he sort of stops, sort of in the middle of the street, and he yells out. He says, "I went Buy the place, follow me now. And there we go again.
Yeah.
And by the time we got there, he had
Uh-huh.
already been sitting at the table. And as soon as they saw he was there, they put a highball on by his plate, because he always ate there and he always had a highball.
Okay.
But I liked him. I liked his personality. He was fun to be around.
Uh-huh. Hmm. Well, let's see. The next thing that would have happened would have been when my mom got breast cancer the first time.
Yeah.
You already shared the story about the doctor and how the doctor was negligent.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what started it all.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody told her that she had breast cancer
Yeah.
until it was really pretty far gone.
Right.
And oh yeah, it was awful. Just, I mean, and I blame myself, because ever since that day, though, I get copies of everything that Artie's medical stuff, my medical stuff, because I don't trust any of them.
Yeah.
They're running a big business, and yeah, they'll take care of you when it's their time to see you,
Uh-huh.
but you may not get anything else.
Yeah.
So
Well, anything else you remember from that period of time when she was receiving cancer treatment and
no,
recovering?
she had. Let me say that was her second. That was her second thing with cancer, as I
This is the
remember.
first one.
This one's the first one,
Yeah.
and I mean she died from the second one.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, it was. And we knew that she was prime target for it.
Yeah.
So it's just the doctors nobody was paying attention,
Uh-huh.
including me, and I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And because like when my parents died, I wasn't even living at home, so I
Yeah.
had never been around the family when somebody passed away. So
Uh-huh.
I had no experience with this at all.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was pretty bad. I blame myself quite a bit for that.
And then around this time, Paul would have graduated college, got married.
Yeah, that's about
Into
the time. And he went down. He had no job because his grades weren't very good.
Yeah.
And he went down to the Bay Area with Angie. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember if they were married at that point. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
close.
They got married right around the time that he left.
Yeah. And yeah, just before they went down. Yeah. And he went down there and he had an interview. I think he only had one interview. And it was him, a Stanford graduate, and a Berkeley graduate. And he got the job.
Yeah.
And the reason he got the job is because he had communication skills.
Uh-huh.
And so during the interviews, he just came over as gangbusters. And then when he got the job, my God, you should have seen, he was doing graduate level fluid mechanics.
Uh-huh.
And then they made him head of all sales and stuff up in Alaska. I mean, and it was just the first time he'd ever felt challenged and wanted to do anything.
Uh-huh. And yeah, Leslie had moved down to California. She'd been down in San Diego for a bit and then
Right.
into Santa Cruz.
Right. And it was Santa Cruz because Santa Cruz was such an offbeat type university at the time.
Yeah.
And that's what attracted her there.
Yeah.
Because she didn't have much stock in any of the traditional universities.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with time, Santa Cruz changed because, there aren't that many students to pay enough tuition who want that kind of an education.
Yeah.
So they had to become more like the typical college. They still kept, and still to this day, keep a lot of that offbeat stuff, and
Right.
Leslie tries to tie into it, as best she can.
And then Amy finished high school as well, and she went down to Eugene at the University of Oregon.
Right. That's where she met Mike.
And met Mike there.
Yeah. And then I remember I visited her down there one time. Oh my goodness.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I think I was, where the hell was I? I must have been in San Diego for some kind of business things or
Okay.
consulting or something. So I said, well, I'll go down to Eugene and visit Amy. And I came down on a Saturday morning. Yeah, Saturday morning, and found her dormitory. And oh my God, what a pig house.
Yeah.
There were people sleeping on the floor, and
Uh-huh.
they had all had a big party the night before. And,
Yeah.
oh God, I said, brother, you know. But I did meet Mike, and I liked Mike.
Uh-huh.
And you could see Mike was more down there. He liked to party, but he
Uh-huh.
was, but Amy just gave into all of it at the time,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. And then so she moved up to Alaska
yeah, she followed
right
him up
after that.
there
Yeah.
because when he graduated from Oregon,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what his degree was in. I can't remember.
Some kind of biology, environmental,
Yeah, I think
like
you're
that.
right. Environmental. That's right. That's right. And so he got a good job up there at the refinery up in Alaska. And then Amy, after the semester ended, went up there,
Yeah.
and, and she had not even come close to graduating. And so after she got up there is when she started going to school again. And that took quite a while, and because she'd only take a few classes at a semester. And finally, at one point, she went full time and was able to graduate.
Yeah. And it wasn't too long before Paul relocated from San Jose to Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah. Well, that's what he went. Angie left at that point, I think.
Well, not right away. They moved to
Right.
Boulder together, and they were there a few years together before she left.
Was it a few years or less than that? A few
It was a
years?
few years, yeah.
And Angie was still in love with her boyfriend from high school.
Uh-huh.
And her mom, was very Catholic, just like Angie. And of
Yeah.
course, Paul.
Uh-huh.
And the mom was just politicking all the time to get Angie married to this boyfriend she had in high school who was also Catholic.
Okay.
And so she kind of was behind the scenes maneuvering that all the time. And
Yeah.
Paul was totally clueless about it.
Uh-huh.
And so then it happens. And then he meets, what was her name? The second wife?
Carol.
Carol. Yeah. I got that out of my mind. And she has these kids. The daughter was like 14 or so like that. And I said, Paul, and he moves them into her place because he was sorry for them because they had no place to live.
Uh-huh.
I said, God, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so he ends up marrying her. And then, did you ever meet those two kids?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The daughter was a teenager. And at one point I visited them up there after they had, must have been in Colorado. Yeah, it was in Colorado. After they'd been up in Alaska and or Canada, wherever they were. And so I was upstairs in the bedroom, staying at their place. And here's the daughter, who's about 16 at this point, running around in bikini underwear all night long, So I got on the phone and I called Artie.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I want you to record this, because that's the kind of thing where they'll accuse you of, molesting somebody.
Okay.
And so I said, record it now. And then I started talking about what was going on with her running all around the place. I said, and keep that recording until I can get out of this situation.
Well, we've got to wrap up right there because we're almost out of time.
Okay.
And then we'll pick it up from there again.